Hello and welcome to the lesson. Last time we created our first layout using fixed positioning. Today we'll try to adjust the layout so that it has a fluid width. This means that the width of the layout will change depending on screen resolution and browser window size. Here I have an HTML document with three divs, the header div, the navigation div, and the content div. I added a background to each of these three elements. Notice that the colors are the same as in the previous lesson, where we specified fixed dimensions. However, dimensions can also be set in relative units. In the lesson, we will be using percentage points. I want the header to stretch out through the whole screen width, so I'll set the width property to 100%. Nothing happened when we refreshed the browser. That's because I haven't specified the height property. I'll try to add the height property and set the value to 20%. Unfortunately, this won't work either. The height will increase depending on the content. To create some basic content, I'll type My CSS Layout into the header div and refresh the browser. As you can see, the height is determined by the size of the text. If I paste this sentence 2 or more times, the total height will increase. In the previous example, we set a fixed height in pixels. Could we do that here again? Yes, it is possible. I'll add the height property and set the value to 30 pixels. At this point, you should see the problem. The fixed height of the header is lower than the height of the content. Because of that, more than one line of text displayed outside the blue area. Therefore, if you really insist on combining absolute and relative sizing, you have to be very careful. Now I'll delete the height property and let the div stretch out according to the content. The header is finished. Let's start the navigation. I'd like to place the navigation inside a left panel. I'll set the width of the panel to 25% of the window size. Let's now add some content inside the div. Navigations are usually created by links, so I'll just type the word link and paste it several times. This is only a preview, so I won't create actual links using A elements. When I refresh the browser, you'll see a red left side panel with some content. The last thing to create is the content section. I'd like to place this section next to the menu, so the width can only be 75% at most. This is because the navigation already takes up 25% of the space. I'll set the width to 75% and again add some filler text. For now, I'll add the same number of rows as to the navigation. When I refresh the browser, you'll see that the section displayed under the navigation rather than next to it. I'll show you how to move the content up. In the previous lesson, we used a negative value of the margin top property. It's pretty obvious that we can't use that here because we don't know the exact value we should set. Because of that, we'll have to use the float property instead. I'll add the float property to the navigation and set the value to left. This will cause the content section to flow around the menu to the right. The content has moved, but it also got shorter. This is because the browser took the 75% from this remaining part. Because of that, I'll change the width property to 100%. As you can see, this is how we wanted the layout to look. Next, I'll show you what happens when I add some text to the content section. I'll add 2 more lines inside the element. After the end of the menu div, the navigation stretches through the whole screen width. Sometimes this can be useful. But what if I want the content to stay the same width and remain aligned to the right? Again, I'll use the float property and add it to the content selector. Let's see how the result looks in a browser. As we can see, the width property causes problems again. There is space for only 75% next to the menu. Because of that, I have to change the content width back to 75%. Finally, the content section looks exactly how I want. At first glance, this might seem a bit confusing. Let's go through it one more time. If the float property is set only to the menu, then the maximum width of the content is 100%. After the menu ends, the content stretches through the whole window width. However, if I also add the float property to the content and set the value to right, we can only count with a maximum width of 75%, because the remaining 25% are taken up by the menu. If we add a higher value, there won't be enough space and the content will move under the menu. Now I'll open the fixed layout from our previous lesson and show you some important differences. When I resize the browser window, all sections keep their dimension. In contrast, with Fluid Layout, the dimensions adapt to the window size. So which layout should we use? It's difficult to decide, and it largely depends on the graphic design. If you use pictures as background, it's better to use fixed layout to avoid distortion. On the other hand, fluid layouts are better for websites with longer texts because they can reduce the visitor's need to scroll. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll look forward to seeing you the next time.